Billionaire invites janitor's daughter to play chess for fun. He didn't know she was a prodigy, who would change his life forever after checkmate. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Richard Sterling had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, a private jet, and more wealth than most countries. But at 45, the tech billionaire felt emptier than ever. Success had become routine, predictable, suffocating. That Tuesday evening, he stayed late at Sterling Technologies again, avoiding the cold silence of his mansion. The building grew quiet as employees filtered out, leaving only the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner. "Mr. Sterling?" A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. Sarah Johnson, the night janitor, stood in his doorway with her cleaning cart. "I'm sorry to bother you, but would it be all right if my daughter waits in the lobby? Her babysitter canceled, and I can't afford to miss work." Richard barely looked up from his computer. "Fine. Just keep her quiet." An hour later, curiosity got the better of him. He found a small girl sitting cross-legged on the marble floor, completely absorbed in a battered chess set. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves, and her worn sneakers had holes in the toes. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. "You play chess?" Richard asked, surprised. The girl looked up with intelligent brown eyes. "My daddy taught me before he went to heaven. Mama says I'm pretty good." Her voice carried a maturity that didn't match her age. "I'm Emma," she said, extending a tiny hand with the confidence of someone much older. "You must be Mr. Sterling. Mama works for you." Richard sat down across from her, amused. "Tell you what, Emma. How about a game? I was chess champion at Harvard." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Really? That sounds fun. But I should warn you, I don't like to lose." As they set up the pieces, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine curiosity. This little girl, with her threadbare clothes and fierce determination, was about to give him the most important lesson of his life. Emma moved her first pawn with deliberate precision. "Your move, Mr. Sterling." Richard smiled condescendingly and made his opening move. 20 minutes later, his smile had completely vanished. This wasn't possible. A 7-year-old couldn't possibly. "Checkmate," Emma announced quietly, her small voice echoing in the vast lobby. Richard stared at the board in disbelief. In 23 moves, this child had systematically dismantled his defenses with the precision of a grandmaster. Her strategy was flawless, her execution devastating. "How did you?" he began, but stopped when he saw tears forming in Emma's eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to make you upset. Please don't tell Mama I was bad." Something cracked inside Richard's chest. This brilliant child was apologizing for her extraordinary gift, terrified of disappointing adults who should be celebrating her talent. "Emma," he said gently, "that was the most beautiful game of chess I've ever seen. You're not in trouble, you're amazing." Just then, Sarah appeared with her cleaning supplies. "Emma, honey, I told you not to bother Mr. Sterling." Richard stood up, his mind racing. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter just beat me at chess. She's incredibly talented." Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir. She gets carried away sometimes. We'll get out of your way." "Wait," Richard called out, but they were already heading toward the elevator. As the doors closed, Emma turned and waved goodbye with a smile that would haunt him for days. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emma's brilliant mind trapped in a world of limitations, and how her mother's eyes had held a desperation he never noticed before. He had no idea that this chance encounter would lead him to discover a secret that would change everything he thought he knew about life, purpose, and what it truly meant to be wealthy. Richard arrived at the office the next morning with an unusual sense of purpose. For the first time in years, something had captured his attention beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. He found himself thinking about Emma's precise moves, the way she had studied the board with such intensity. "Linda," he called to his assistant, "I need you to pull the employment file for Sarah Johnson. She's on the night cleaning crew." Linda raised an eyebrow but complied. 20 minutes later, she placed a thin folder on his desk. Not much here, Mr. Sterling. Single mother, hired 6 months ago. Previous employer was Mercy General Hospital, also as a janitor. Richard opened the file, scanning the sparse information. Sarah Johnson, age 28, no college education listed. Emergency contact, none. Current address, 1247 Riverside Drive, apartment 3B. That evening, Richard made an excuse to work late again. When Sarah arrived with her cleaning cart, he was waiting in the lobby. Mrs. Johnson, he said, standing up from the same spot where he'd played chess with Emma. I was hoping Emma might be with you tonight. Sarah's face tensed. She's at home doing homework, Mr. Sterling. I found a neighbor who can watch her for a few hours. I hope last night didn't cause any problems. Actually, I was wondering if Emma might like to play chess again. She's remarkably talented. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Talented doesn't pay the bills, sir. Emma's smart, but smart doesn't change where we live or what we can afford. Richard felt a strange pull in his chest. Where did she learn to play like that? For a moment, Sarah's tough exterior cracked. Her father. He was special. Before he died, he taught her everything he knew about chess. Said it would help her think differently about problems. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow, Richard said impulsively. About Emma. There might be opportunities, Mr. Sterling. Sarah interrupted, her voice firm but respectful. I appreciate your interest, but Emma and we've learned not to count on promises from people like you. We're doing fine on our own. As she walked away, Richard realized that for the first time in his adult life, someone had essentially dismissed him. And somehow, that made him more determined than ever. The next day, Richard did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He drove himself. No chauffeur, no security detail, just him and his conscience in a Tesla heading toward the forgotten side of Manhattan. Riverside Drive looked nothing like the addresses in his contacts. The building was a pre-war structure with cracked windows and fire escapes that seemed to sag under their own weight. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off brick walls covered in graffiti. Richard climbed to the 3rd floor, his Italian leather shoes clicking against worn linoleum. Apartment 3B had a door that had been painted so many times the number was barely visible. Through the thin walls, he could hear a conversation that made him stop in his tracks. Mama, why can't I join the chess club at school? Emma's voice, muffled but clear. Baby, the chess club costs money for tournaments and equipment. Money we don't have right now. But I'm good at it. Really good. Maybe if I got better, I could win money and help us. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard pressed his ear closer to the door, feeling like an intruder but unable to walk away. Emma, listen to me carefully. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. You are the smartest little girl I know. But being smart in our world, it's not enough. Rich people, they have opportunities we don't. They have connections, education, resources. We have to work twice as hard for half as much. Like Mr. Sterling? He seemed nice. Mr. Sterling lives in a different world, honey. People like him, they notice people like us when it's convenient. Then they forget. Richard felt like he'd been punched. He stood there for 10 minutes, listening to Emma practice chess moves aloud, explaining her strategies to invisible opponents with the passion of someone who had found their calling. When he finally knocked, the apartment fell silent. Sarah opened the door, her face cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and something that looked like fear. Mr. Sterling? How did you? I'd like to speak with you. Both of you. The apartment was smaller than his walk-in closet, but it was clean and organized. Emma sat at a card table, her chess set arranged in front of her, working through what looked like advanced chess puzzles from a library book. Emma, Richard said, sitting down across from her. Show me what you're working on. For the next hour, Richard watched in amazement as Emma explained complex chess strategies with the fluency of a master. She had created her own notation system, developed unique opening sequences, and could calculate moves 15 steps ahead. Where did you learn all this? He asked. Emma looked at her mother, who nodded reluctantly. I read every chess book in the library. Mrs. Patterson at the library, she orders special books for me sometimes. And I watch videos online at the community center when they have free computer time. Richard felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just talent, this was genius, trapped by circumstances that had nothing to do with Emma's potential. Mrs. Johnson, he said carefully, I'd like to make a proposal. Sarah's defense mechanisms activated instantly. Mr. Sterling, we don't need charity. It's not charity, Richard replied, his voice steadier than he felt. It's investment. Emma has a gift that could take her anywhere she wants to go. But gifts need cultivation, training, opportunities. Emma looked between the adults, her young mind clearly processing the tension in the room. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah asked, crossing her arms. Richard had been thinking about this all day. I want to provide Emma with a chess tutor. Professional coaching. Entry fees for tournaments. And I'd like to set up a college fund for her future. In exchange for what? Sarah's voice carried the weight of someone who had learned that nothing came free. Nothing. No strings attached. I just want to see what Emma can accomplish with the right support. Emma's eyes lit up. Mama, that means I could play in real tournaments? Against other kids who are good. Sarah's face was a battlefield of hope and skepticism. Mr. Sterling, people like you don't just hand out opportunities to people like us. What do you really want? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Richard realized he didn't have a good answer because he wasn't entirely sure himself. All he knew was that watching Emma's brilliance being wasted felt like a crime against nature. I want to do something meaningful, he said finally. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and I've never used it for anything that mattered. Emma matters. Sarah studied his face for a long moment. And when you get bored? When the novelty wears off? What happens to Emma then? I won't get bored. You say that now. But Emma isn't a pet project. She's a little girl who's already lost her father. She doesn't need another adult who might disappear from her life. Emma had been quietly listening, moving chess pieces absent-mindedly. Suddenly she spoke up. Mama, maybe we could try. Just for a little while? Sarah looked at her daughter, and Richard saw the moment her resolve wavered. Emma, baby, it's complicated. But you always tell me that smart people find ways to solve complicated problems. Emma said with 7-year-old logic that was impossible to argue with. Richard pulled out his phone and showed them an email. I've already contacted Marcus Williams. He's a chess master who's trained 3 national youth champions. He's willing to meet with Emma this weekend. You already contacted someone? Sarah's voice rose. Without asking us? I wanted to know if it was even possible before I suggested it. Richard said, realizing how presumptuous that sounded. But nothing happens unless you both agree. Emma looked up at her mother with pleading eyes. Mama, please? I promise I'll still help with everything at home. I'll still be good in school. I just want to see how good I can really be. Sarah closed her eyes, and Richard could see her internal struggle. When she opened them, her expression had changed. 1 month, she said finally. 1 month trial. If Emma likes it and it doesn't interfere with school or cause problems, we'll reassess. But Mr. Sterling, the moment this becomes disruptive to our lives, it stops. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Richard said, trying to hide his excitement. Emma jumped up and hugged her mother. Thank you, Mama. I won't let you down. As Richard prepared to leave, Emma called out to him. Mr. Sterling? Thank you for believing in me. Walking back to his car, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine anticipation for tomorrow. He had no idea that within weeks, he would discover the real reason Emma's father had taught her chess, and why that knowledge would change everything. Saturday morning found Richard nervously pacing his office, checking his watch every few minutes. He'd arranged to meet Marcus Williams and Emma at a quiet chess club in Midtown, neutral territory that wouldn't intimidate Sarah. Marcus Williams was a tall, dignified man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see several moves ahead in any conversation. He'd been skeptical when Richard first called, but had agreed to meet Emma after Richard described her victory over him. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said as they shook hands, "I've seen a lot of parents overestimate their children's abilities. I hope you understand that raw talent is just the beginning." "I understand," Richard replied, though he felt protective of Emma before she'd even arrived. Sarah and Emma entered the chess club hand in hand, both clearly nervous. Emma wore her best dress, a simple blue outfit that had seen better days but was clean and carefully pressed. Sarah had pulled her hair back severely, her posture defensive. "Emma," Richard said, kneeling to her level, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Williams. He's going to play a game with you." Emma's eyes widened as she looked up at Marcus. "Are you really a chess master?" Marcus smiled, his stern expression softening. "I am. And I hear you're pretty good yourself. Shall we see what you can do?" They sat at a board in the corner of the club. Richard and Sarah watched from nearby chairs, the tension between them palpable. "Emma," Marcus said, setting up the pieces, "I want you to play your natural game. Don't worry about impressing anyone. Just play chess." What happened next left everyone speechless. Emma didn't just play chess, she played with an intuition that seemed to transcend her age. Her moves were creative, aggressive, and strategically sound. More importantly, she explained her thinking process with clarity that amazed Marcus. "I'm putting my knight here because in 6 moves, it will support my attack on your king's position," she said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. Marcus began to perspire. This 7-year-old wasn't just good, she was extraordinary. By the 30th move, he was fighting for his life on the board. "Emma," he said, studying the position, "where did you learn this opening sequence?" "My daddy taught me. He said it was called the ghost variation because it looks like you're not threatening anything, but you really are." Marcus's face went pale. "Ghost variation? Emma, can you tell me more about what your daddy taught you?" Emma looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "He taught me lots of special moves. He said they were secret techniques that only really smart people could understand. He made me promise to only use them when I was ready." "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "what was your daddy's name?" "David Johnson. But before he married Mama, his name was David Petrov." The chess piece slipped from Marcus's fingers, clattering onto the board. Richard saw the color drain from the master's face. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk. Privately." As Marcus and Sarah stepped away for a hushed conversation, Richard watched Emma continue to study the board, completely absorbed in the game. He couldn't hear what Marcus was saying, but he could see Sarah's face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that looked like fear. When they returned, Marcus sat down across from Emma with newfound respect. "Emma, your father was a very special man. And you, young lady, are going to be something extraordinary. Does that mean you'll teach me?" Emma asked hopefully. "Emma," Marcus said solemnly, "it would be my honor." As they prepared to leave, Richard pulled Marcus aside. "What was that about? What did you tell Sarah?" Marcus looked back at Emma, who was showing her mother the final position on the board. "Mr. Sterling, that little girl isn't just talented. She's been taught by someone who understood chess at a level that very few people ever reach. David Petrov was a legend, a grandmaster who disappeared from the chess world 15 years ago. We all wondered what happened to him. And now you know. Now I know he fell in love, changed his name, and spent his last years teaching his daughter everything he knew." Marcus paused. "Mr. Sterling, Emma doesn't just have potential. She has the foundation to become one of the greatest chess players who ever lived. The question is, are you prepared for what that means?" Richard looked at Emma, who was laughing at something her mother had said. "What does it mean?" "It means that child is going to change the chess world. And probably your world too." 3 weeks into Emma's training, Richard found himself looking forward to her sessions more than any business meeting. He'd started attending every lesson, fascinated by watching her mind work through complex problems with mathematical precision. Marcus had been right about Emma's potential. In just 21 days, she had progressed at a rate that defied explanation. She was already competing at a level that typically took years to achieve. Mr. Sterling, Marcus said one evening as they watched Emma solve a particularly difficult puzzle, I need to tell you something about David Petrov that Sarah doesn't know. Richard's attention sharpened. What do you mean? David Petrov wasn't just a grandmaster. He was working on something revolutionary when he disappeared. A new approach to chess that combined traditional strategy with psychological warfare. He was developing techniques that could give players unprecedented advantages. And you think he taught these to Emma? Marcus nodded gravely. I'm certain of it. Some of the moves she makes, the strategies she employs, they're beyond anything in traditional chess literature. David was creating a new form of the game, and Emma is his living masterpiece. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He found himself researching David Petrov online, discovering articles about a brilliant young grandmaster who had vanished at the height of his career. The photos showed a man with intense eyes and Emma's same determined expression. The next morning, he made a decision that would change everything. He called Sarah. Mrs. Johnson, I need to ask you something important about Emma's father. Mr. Sterling, I don't think that's appropriate, please. Marcus told me about David's chess career. But I need to know about the man you married. Who was he really? There was a long silence. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was heavy with old pain. David was brilliant. Not just at chess, but at everything. He saw patterns where other people saw chaos. He could predict what people would do before they knew it themselves. Why did he leave chess? He said the chess world was corrupt. That there were people who would use his innovations for the wrong reasons. He wanted to disappear, to live a normal life. Sarah's voice cracked. When Emma was born, he said she was his greatest achievement. He spent every moment he could teaching her, preparing her. Preparing her for what? I don't know. He died before he could finish. But Richard. Sarah had never used his first name before. Before he died, he made me promise something. He said if Emma ever showed real genius at chess, I should be very careful about who I trusted. He said there were people who would want to use her. Richard felt a chill. What kind of people? He never explained. But he was terrified of something. In his last weeks, he kept saying Emma was special, that she would have opportunities he never had, but also dangers. Sarah, where are David's chess materials? His notebooks, his games? I saved everything. Boxes of notebooks, game analyses, strategies I don't understand. Emma sometimes looks through them, but most of it is too advanced even for her. I need to see them. Why? Richard stared out his office window at the city below. Because I think Marcus is right. Emma isn't just talented, she's carrying forward something her father started. And if that's true, then we need to understand what we're dealing with. That evening, Richard sat in Sarah's tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes of David Petrov's life work. The notebooks were filled with diagrams, strategies, and what looked like psychological profiles of famous players. But it was the final notebook that made Richard's blood run cold. On the last page, in David's careful handwriting, were the words, Emma will finish what I started. She will revolutionize chess. But they will come for her. Trust no one completely. Protect her gift, but more importantly, protect her heart. Below that, a list of names Richard recognized: wealthy businessmen, chess federation officials, people who moved in Richard's own circles. Next to each name was a single word: dangerous. Richard's own name wasn't on the list. David Petrov had died before Richard Sterling became interested in chess. But as Richard read through the notebooks, he began to understand that Emma wasn't just a gifted child, she was the inheritor of a legacy that some very powerful people would kill to control, and he was the only one standing between Emma and those who would use her extraordinary gift for their own purposes. The real game was just beginning. Richard spent the next week researching every name in David Petrov's notebook. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Viktor Kozlov, a Russian oligarch who owned several chess academies in Eastern Europe. Dr. Heinrich Brenner, a German businessman who had been linked to performance-enhancing drug scandals in competitive chess. Chen Weiming, a Chinese technology mogul who had been quietly acquiring chess AI companies. Each man had one thing in common: they had all tried to recruit David Petrov before his disappearance. Marcus, Richard called the chess master urgently. I need to meet with you. Tonight. They met at a diner in Queens, far from Richard's usual haunts. Marcus looked haggard, older than his years. I've been doing my own research, Marcus said before Richard could speak. David Petrov wasn't just developing new chess strategies. He was creating something that could predict human behavior through chess patterns. Military applications, business negotiations, psychological warfare. And Emma has access to all of this? She's living it. Every game she plays, every move she makes, she's unconsciously applying principles that most grandmasters never discover. But Richard, we have a problem. Marcus slid a newspaper across the table. The headline read, Child chess prodigy emerges from nowhere. Emma's photo was on the front page, taken at her latest tournament. She's too good to stay hidden. Marcus continued. Word is spreading in the chess community. People are asking questions about who she is, where she came from, who's training her. Richard felt a knot forming in his stomach. What kind of people? The kind David Petrov was afraid of. I've gotten 3 calls this week from talent scouts asking about Emma. One of them was from Kozlov Industries. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He found himself driving to Emma's apartment building, parking across the street just to make sure everything was normal. At 2 a.m., he saw a black sedan parked at the end of the block, its occupants watching the building. Richard's protective instincts kicked in. He approached the car, tapping on the driver's window. 2 men in expensive suits looked up at him with cold, calculating eyes. Can I help you, gentlemen? Richard asked, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Just enjoying the evening, Mr. Sterling, the driver said in a slight Russian accent. Beautiful neighborhood. They knew who he was. They knew exactly why he was there. I think you'd enjoy it more from somewhere else, Richard said firmly. The passenger leaned forward. We're simply interested in the young chess player who lives here. Very talented girl. We'd like to offer her opportunities. She's not interested. How can you be sure? We haven't made our offer yet. Richard memorized their license plate as they drove away. When he ran it through his private security team the next morning, the results confirmed his fears. The car was registered to a company owned by Viktor Kozlov. Emma was being watched. And now, so was he. Despite the growing danger, Emma's chess career was exploding. In 6 weeks, she had won 3 youth tournaments and was being invited to compete against adult players. Her unconventional style was baffling opponents twice her age. She doesn't play like a child, commented Grandmaster Patricia Wells after Emma defeated her in an exhibition match. She plays like someone who understands chess at a level I'm still trying to reach. Richard hired a security firm to discreetly protect Emma and Sarah, but he didn't tell them about the surveillance. Sarah was already nervous about the attention Emma was receiving, and he didn't want to add to her stress. Mr. Sterling, Sarah said after Emma's latest victory, I'm getting worried. Emma's picture was in Chess Monthly. People are starting to recognize her on the street. That's normal for rising chess stars, Richard assured her, though he felt anything but assured. Is it normal for strange men to ask our neighbors questions about us? Because that's been happening too. Richard's heart sank. What kind of questions? About Emma's father. About where she learned to play. About who's financing her career. Sarah's voice was tight with anxiety. Richard, I'm scared. This feels like what David warned me about. That evening, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He called a meeting with Marcus and Sarah in his private conference room. I need to tell you both something, he began, and explained what he'd discovered about David Petrov's research and the people who were now interested in Emma. Sarah's face went white. You're saying my daughter is in danger because of chess? I'm saying Emma represents something much bigger than chess. Her father's work, the techniques he taught her, could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the right people. Marcus nodded grimly. David was creating the future of competitive strategy. Emma is the only person who truly understands his system. So what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We protect her, Richard said. But we also need to be smart about it. If we try to hide Emma completely, it'll just make them more determined. We need to control the narrative. What do you mean? Marcus asked. We make Emma so public, so visible, that no one can touch her without the whole world watching. We turn her into a celebrity. Her protection becomes her fame. Sarah stood up abruptly. Absolutely not. I won't let you turn my daughter into a circus act. Sarah, listen to me. These people operate in shadows. They can't afford to be connected to anything that might hurt a child in the public eye. If Emma becomes famous enough, she becomes untouchable. And if you're wrong? If making her famous just makes her a bigger target? Richard met her eyes. Then we'll face that together. But right now, hiding isn't working. They've already found her. The next morning, Richard's worst fears were confirmed. Emma's photo appeared on the front page of the New York Times. 7-year-old chess genius stuns masters. The article detailed her meteoric rise and speculated about her mysterious background. By noon, Richard had received 12 calls from various talent management companies, all wanting to represent Emma. 3 of them were fronts for the men in David Petrov's notebook. The hunters were closing in. The invitation arrived on expensive letterhead. The International Youth Chess Foundation cordially invites Emma Johnson to participate in our exclusive training program in Switzerland. Richard read the letter with growing dread. The foundation was legitimate, well-funded, and had produced several world champions. It was also quietly backed by Viktor Kozlov. It's a trap, Marcus said when Richard showed him the letter. They want to get her away from us, away from her support system. But if we refuse, Richard replied, it'll look suspicious. Every chess parent in the world would kill for this opportunity. Sarah was torn. The program offered Emma chances she could never provide: world-class training, international exposure, a path to greatness. But something in her mother's intuition screamed danger. What would David do? She asked during their emergency meeting. David would find a way to turn their trap against them, Marcus said quietly. He was always 3 moves ahead of his opponents. That's when Richard had an idea that was either brilliant or insane. What if we say yes? Are you crazy? Sarah exclaimed. Hear me out. What if we accept the invitation, but we go with Emma? All of us. We make it a public event, bring media attention, turn it into a celebration of American chess talent. They can't do anything to Emma if the whole world is watching. And if they try anyway? Richard's jaw set with determination. Then they'll discover what happens when someone threatens a child under my protection. The next week, they flew to Switzerland in Richard's private jet, accompanied by 2 documentary filmmakers, a reporter from Sports Illustrated, and Richard's security team disguised as chess assistants. The Youth Foundation's facility was impressive, a mountain retreat with world-class chess instruction and luxurious accommodations. Emma was thrilled by the other young players, many of whom were already internationally ranked. But Richard noticed things that made his skin crawl. The facility was isolated, with limited cell phone coverage. The staff was overly interested in Emma's background and training methods. And Viktor Kozlov himself was scheduled to arrive the next day. We need to be ready, Richard told Marcus and Sarah that night. Whatever they're planning, it happens soon. At 3 a.m., Richard's security chief woke him with urgent news. Mr. Sterling, we've intercepted communications. They're planning to approach Emma tomorrow with a private training offer. They want to separate her from the group. Not happening, Richard said, fully alert now. There's more. They've been recording her games, analyzing her style. They think they can reverse engineer her father's techniques by studying her play patterns. Richard felt a surge of protective rage. These people saw Emma not as a brilliant child, but as a source of valuable intellectual property to be exploited. Get everyone ready, he ordered. We're leaving first thing in the morning. But when morning came, they discovered that leaving wouldn't be as simple as they'd hoped. The roads were mysteriously blocked by maintenance work, and the nearest airport was closed due to weather conditions. They were trapped, and the game was about to begin. Viktor Kozlov was not what Richard had expected. The Russian oligarch was refined, softly spoken, and genuinely seemed to care about chess. He spoke to Emma with the kind of respect usually reserved for fellow grandmasters. "You play remarkably like your father," Kozlov said during their first meeting. "David was a friend of mine, you know." Emma's eyes lit up. "You knew my daddy?" "I knew him well. We worked together on several projects before he chose a different path." Sarah tensed beside Richard. This wasn't in any of David's notebooks. "Emma," Kozlov continued, "your father was developing something revolutionary. A new way of understanding not just chess, but human behavior itself. He believed that chess patterns could predict how people would act in any situation. That's what Marcus tells me," Emma said innocently. "He says I play like I can see what people are thinking." "Exactly. And with the right training, the right resources, you could become not just a chess champion, but someone who could change the world." Richard felt alarm bells ringing. "Mr. Kozlov, Emma is 7 years old. She should be worried about second grade, not changing the world." Kozlov's smile was patient but cold. "Mr. Sterling, with respect, you don't understand what you're dealing with. David Petrov wasn't just a chess player. He was a strategic genius who could have revolutionized military intelligence, business negotiation, even international diplomacy. And you want to use a child to continue his work? I want to give Emma the tools to fulfill her destiny. David's techniques, properly developed, could prevent wars, resolve conflicts, create peace through understanding human nature." It sounded noble, but Richard saw the calculation behind Kozlov's eyes. This wasn't about peace, it was about power. "Emma," Kozlov said, turning back to the girl, "would you like to see something your father was working on?" Before anyone could object, Kozlov pulled out a tablet and showed Emma a chess position. "This is called the Petrov Protocol. Your father believed that anyone who could solve this puzzle would understand the deepest secrets of human behavior." Emma studied the position for less than 30 seconds. "Oh, that's easy. You move the queen to h4, then the knight to f6, and the opponent has to respond to the check, but they don't realize you're actually controlling their next 5 moves." The room fell silent. Marcus went pale. Sarah gasped. "My God!" Kozlov breathed. "She sees it. She actually sees it." "What does that mean?" Richard demanded. Marcus answered, his voice shaking. "It means Emma doesn't just understand chess. She understands how to control human decision-making. That puzzle has been unsolved for 15 years. Chess masters have studied it without finding the solution. And Emma solved it in 30 seconds, Kozlov said, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like hunger. "Mr. Sterling, you have no idea what you've been protecting. Emma doesn't just play chess, she reads minds through chess patterns." Richard felt the world shifting around him. He thought he was protecting a gifted child. Now he realized he was protecting someone who could literally change the balance of power in the world. "She's not leaving with you," Richard said firmly. "Mr. Sterling," Kozlov's voice hardened, "I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." That's when Richard noticed the security guards positioned around the room, and realized that their chess retreat had become a very different kind of game. The facility's true nature became clear within hours. The other children were moved to different sections of the building. Emma, Sarah, Marcus, and Richard were confined to a luxurious suite under the guise of special accommodations. "They can't keep us here," Sarah said, pacing the room like a caged animal. "This is kidnapping." "Officially, we're honored guests," Richard replied grimly. "Kozlov's too smart to do anything that looks illegal. But we're not leaving until Emma agrees to his training program." Marcus was studying chess positions with Emma, trying to keep her distracted from the growing tension. "Emma, sweetie, your daddy taught you about special moves. Did he teach you about special situations too?" Emma nodded seriously. "He said sometimes the best chess players have to know when not to play chess. When to leave the game." "Smart man," Marcus muttered. That night, Richard's security team made contact through a hidden communicator. Sir, we're working on extraction, but the facility is more fortified than we expected. We need time. Time we don't have, Richard whispered back. They're planning to move Emma tomorrow. The next morning, Kozlov arrived with Dr. Brenner and 2 other men Richard recognized from David's danger list. They wanted to conduct aptitude tests with Emma, tests that would map her father's techniques completely. Absolutely not, Sarah said, standing protectively in front of her daughter. Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Brenner said in heavily accented English, we are not asking. Emma's abilities are too important to be wasted on children's tournaments. She belongs in a program that can develop her full potential. She belongs with her mother, Richard said, stepping forward. Mr. Sterling, you have been useful in identifying and developing Emma's talent. But your role is finished. Emma needs professional guidance now. Emma, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. What if I don't want to go with you? Kozlov knelt down to her level. Emma, you don't understand yet what you're capable of. Your father's gift, properly trained, could help solve problems that have plagued humanity for centuries. Don't you want to help people? I do want to help people, Emma said thoughtfully. But my daddy told me that good people ask permission, and bad people take things without asking. Emma, we're not taking anything. We're offering you opportunities. Emma looked up at the adults surrounding her, her 7-year-old face showing wisdom beyond her years. My daddy also taught me something special about chess. He said sometimes the best move is the one nobody expects. Before anyone could react, Emma pulled out a small device Marcus had given her, a chess timer with a hidden alarm. She pressed the button, and suddenly the room filled with smoke. Richard's security team burst through the windows rappelling from helicopters. In the chaos that followed, Richard grabbed Emma while Sarah and Marcus ran for the exit. Go! 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 Richard shouted, carrying Emma toward the helicopter that had landed in the courtyard. As they lifted off, Emma looked back at the facility below. Mr. Sterling, are we safe now? Richard held her close, finally understanding what David Petrov had known all along. Emma wasn't just a chess prodigy, she was a child who could change the world, and there would always be people who wanted to use that power. We're safe for now, Emma. But the real game is just beginning. The helicopter flew toward the dawn, carrying the most important chess piece in the world toward an uncertain future. 6 months after the Switzerland incident, Richard thought they had found peace. Emma was homeschooled by the best tutors money could buy, played chess under carefully controlled conditions, and seemed to be thriving as a normal 8-year-old. But David Petrov's legacy had one final surprise. Mr. Sterling, Emma said one evening as they practiced chess in his penthouse, I need to tell you something about my daddy. Richard looked up from the board where Emma had just executed another impossibly brilliant combination. What is it, sweetheart? He left me a message. A special message that I was only supposed to understand when I got older. Emma's voice carried a gravity that made Richard's chest tighten. What kind of message? Emma walked to her backpack and pulled out a battered notebook Richard had never seen before. This was hidden in my old chess set. The one Daddy gave me. I found it last week. Richard opened the notebook with trembling hands. The first page was addressed to Emma in David's careful handwriting. My brilliant daughter, if you are reading this, then the wolves have found you. But you are not prey, Emma. You are the hunter. Everything I taught you was preparation for this moment. The game is not chess, the game is life itself. And you, my love, are about to win. The rest of the notebook contained detailed profiles of every person who had pursued Emma, Kozlov, Brenner, even competitors Richard didn't know existed. But more importantly, it contained David's final strategy. Emma, Richard said slowly, do you understand what this means? I think so. Daddy knew they would come for me. He knew someone good would help me, someone like you. And he planned for us to stop them forever. How? Emma smiled with David's same confident expression. By giving them what they want, but not the way they expect to get it. The next morning, Richard received a call that chilled his blood. Viktor Kozlov was in New York, and he was threatening to expose Richard's business dealings unless Emma agreed to a meeting. "This ends now," Richard told Sarah and Marcus. "Emma, what did your father's plan say about this?" Emma opened the notebook to a page titled Endgame. Her small finger traced the words as she read aloud. "When they corner you, remember that the best defense is an attack they never see coming." That afternoon, Richard walked into the Plaza Hotel's oak room with Emma beside him. Kozlov sat at a corner table with two bodyguards, his face showing surprise that Richard had brought the child. "Mr. Sterling, I asked to meet with you privately." "Emma wanted to come," Richard said, helping her into a chair. "She has something to say to you." Kozlov leaned forward, intrigued. "Oh? And what is that, little one?" Emma looked up at him with eyes that seemed far older than her 8 years. "Mr. Kozlov, you want to use my daddy's chess techniques to control people. But you don't understand what they really are. Enlighten me." "They're not techniques for controlling people. They're techniques for understanding people. My daddy believed that if you truly understand someone, you can help them make better choices, not force them to do what you want." Kozlov's smile was patronizing. "A lovely sentiment, but naive. Power is about control, Emma. Your father's methods could give nations enormous advantages." "That's where you're wrong," Emma said, pulling out a small recording device. "My daddy taught me to always be 3 moves ahead. This conversation is being broadcast live to every major news network in the world." Kozlov's face went white as Emma continued. "Everyone is hearing you talk about using a child's chess skills to control people and nations. Everyone knows who you are and what you wanted to do to me." Richard felt a surge of pride and terror. Emma had just executed the most sophisticated trap he'd ever witnessed. "You see, Mr. Kozlov," Emma said, standing up on her chair so she could look him in the eye, "my daddy's most important lesson wasn't about chess. It was about choosing to be good instead of powerful. And now the whole world knows what you choose." Within hours, the story exploded across every media platform. Viktor Kozlov, caught on tape trying to exploit a child prodigy for strategic advantage, became an international pariah. The other men from David's list quickly distanced themselves from anything connected to Emma. A week later, Richard found Emma in his office, setting up a chess board. "Want to play?" she asked. "Always," Richard replied, sitting across from her. "Emma, what you did with Kozlov. That was incredibly brave. And dangerous. My daddy always said the most important victories are the ones that protect other people. Now no one will try to use me to hurt others. And what about your chess career? Your tournaments?" Emma moved her first pawn with the same precision Richard remembered from their first game. "I'll keep playing chess because I love it. But I'll also use what Daddy taught me to help people. Maybe I'll become a teacher, or a counselor, or someone who helps solve problems." Richard moved his piece, marveling at how this extraordinary child had taught him about courage, purpose, and what it truly meant to be wealthy. "Emma, you know I'll always be here to help you, whatever you decide to do." "I know, Mr. Sterling. That's what makes you good people." As they played, Richard reflected on how Emma had changed his life. She had shown him that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the difference you made in someone else's world. He had started by trying to help a gifted child, but Emma had ended up saving him from a life of meaningless success. "Your move, Mr. Sterling," Emma said with a grin. Richard looked at the board and smiled. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he belonged, across from the most remarkable person he'd ever met, learning that the best games weren't about winning, but about the connections you made along the way. "You know what, Emma? I think I've already won." Emma's laughter filled the room like music, and Richard Sterling finally understood what it meant to be truly rich.